Here's all the kids waving at us. Because, you know, although we call this the 30,000 islands, they gave up counting in the old days too. There's actually somewhere between 60,000 to 90,000 islands. What you see now, it's like this for the next 150 kilometers all the way along the eastern and northern shore of Georgian Bay. So it kind of goes on and on and on and on. Now the reason for the variation in the number of islands is because I should say the water level changes. Now it'll change with the wind a bit. This northwest wind, when it blows like this, it brings it up like a half an inch or an inch. If it became a southeast wind and blew for about 3 days with this strength, it would go down an inch or so, maybe 2. But it changes through every season. The low point is always like December, and the high point is always about August, although this year it'll probably be September because of the late spring. And this year the water never went down last winter because the whole bay froze, so there was no evaporation loss at all, because that does happen even in the winter. And of course, if you have a hot, dry summer or cool, wet summer, it'll go up or down a little bit. Now, 2 years ago, the water was about 2.5 feet lower than what it is right now. But 15 years ago, it was at an all-time high, about 2.5 feet higher. There's a rock back to the right with a line of gold moss. That's how high the water was 15 years ago. Now, the big island on the right, this is Minnetonka Island. Minnetonka sounds like Penetanguishene. Well, that's a native word. It means place where the blueberries grow. The place where the blueberries grow. There's blueberries that grow on the island. Now, on the other side of the island, there was a resort built. The island has an interesting history. In the 1890s, a hotel was built on the other side called the Minnetonka Resort. It included a number of buildings for accommodations. It had a restaurant, a ballroom. They also put decks or tennis courts. And the sculpture going back to the right where the water comes. They even had hotels here. A farm on top of the cows, pigs, chickens, the restaurant. The hotel did very well from the 1890s through the roaring 1920s, and it went bankrupt with the Great Depression. During World War II, the Navy opened up a sea cadet camp on the island called Princess Alice Sea Cadet Camp. And then after the war, a guy by the name of Bob brought the artists up to their cottages. Now these are people who had a place up in an area called DSCF7403-AKUC. It's a little further north of where we go. But one of the families still have land there to this day. I'm sure you've heard of the family. They was from their stores across Canada. They've had cottages up in DSCF since the late 1800s. And actually, they went one step further. Back in the 1920s or 30s, they built a lodge where the artists could stay on one of their little islands. Now the lodge is long gone, but we still call the island by its nickname, Artist Island. In the distance to the left, where the hill drops down dramatically, that's where Wenda Park is on the mainland. And on the horizon to our left, we can see a little bit of Christian Island, the main island of the First Nations Reserve. Now out that way, there's a half a dozen shipwrecks. So scuba divers do come up here to do wreck diving on weekends. Saw a boat up in the area a couple of weeks ago. They trailered up their boat. It was one of these aluminum ones. It was an outfit from Hickory. Building on the left with the ramp in front, a sliding door which is open right now, and a peaked roof. They built a new dock on the left which has a blue sailboat tied up there. Look and see if inside. There's a new cottage on the far side if you look over the roof of the house off the little dock where the sailboat is. And actually near the old cottage there's a green vehicle there. Believe it or not, they actually have a 6-wheel all-terrain vehicle to drive around the island. Although one time they were hauling a bunch of firewood from one building to the other. There's a new boathouse around the corner we'll see in a moment too. The one thing that hasn't changed though is the guard. And there he is on the left. He's a British soldier with the red jacket and the black hat. And like the guards in front of Buckingham Palace protecting the Queen, he stands there rigid attention and stiff as a board. So if you wave to him, go ahead. He's not going to wave back. If you do see him waving, please report that observation to Paul at the bar if you're going to want to know. There's the new boathouse on the left. Now that one, it looks like a wooden dock, but that's just a wooden skirt around it. They build these docks up here with a steel frame full of boulders because, especially there, the ice in the winter when it breaks up in the spring gets pushed in there. Here comes another power boat on the right. Quiet afternoon. You know who that was? Somebody doesn't care what the price of gasoline is. Because those ones sure burn it up. There's actually a type of boat. I guess all the owners hang around together and they show up every once in a while. Sometimes about 6 or 8 of them or 8 or more. They're like these $1 million cigar boats they call them. Sometimes have 4 engines and they can pull up to about 150 kilometers an hour. And they come up here sometimes. They burn $5,000 worth of fuel in a day. Now here we are in a beautiful spot here, right out of the wind. This is Governor's Island. It's a perfectly sheltered spot, a great place to have a cottage. Now this island on the left used to belong to Bob Jarvis. He's the guy who bought the island on the right from the Navy after the war, and his family still owned the island on the right. Now he knew it was for sale because he had his cottage on the left. Not the whole thing you see, just the part that's like a tower. That was the original Jarvis cottage. His father before him bought the island around 1900, and his father's nickname was the Governor. Anyway, my dad used to tell me he'd always go by the Jarvis cottage, which was just the tower. It had an open deck, and you'd always see Bob Jarvis on the top of that tower, sitting in the breeze, sipping whiskey on ice every day and all day long. And to make it easier to get a refill, they actually built a dumbwaiter elevator in the tower, so when the glass was empty, he could set it down in the kitchen. There was a Mr. Rummy Toy from Penatang Machines who would refill the glass and fill it back up. Now, he died in the 60s, and the new family that bought it off the widows rebuilt it. Now, take a look at this quote on the right. I don't know if I would use this name, but that's the Icebreaker Titanic on our right. I'd tell it's an electrician. There he goes, zooming on. Hey, Toure, he's got to get back to the beer store. Now, they put a big addition on the cottage back there. My uncle did the stonework. And they have two more cottages here. The middle one was added about 15 years ago. The third one's been here about 100 years. And renovated. And then there's an extra little building as well. We went over their power cables. Everybody up here is on the power grid. There's underwater cables linking everybody into the grid, except for Giant Cube Island, too far out. And then on the left, you see the little hut. That's the water pumping station. So they have electricity. They draw their water from the bay. And then for the other utility, what do they do for sewage? Well, obviously they can't just let it go into the bay. Everybody has to have an approved septic system. And since it's tough and big and rocky, you have to have something that's above ground. So they use these big tanks and has a leaking system on it. So when the main tank is full of solid waste, then they have to call the guy from Honey Harbor. His name is Peppy. His company will go to these guys what we call the honey boat to get Honey Harbor to pump it up. You can see the power cables and the water on the left are sign with the little orange stripes. Now this place here on the left used to be part of the Jarvis property. Another family that attended the island. They built a beautiful cottage from the old boathouse. There's actually a lower level if you look back. The upper level just got a wall of windows along the north side. You get a nice it's like a natural break wall to break it up. There's some trees growing right on the left here because there's a pond right beside the trees. And inside that pond is what I call the Orange Bay Hot Tub. The rock gets heated up pretty fast. Anyway, the thing about being way over there is that you get a lot of wind. But on the other hand, you don't have any mosquitoes. Chaos. Now there were 3 cottages built here 2 years ago along this string of islands. And I did see this year, I don't know the price, but up ahead on the left there's a for sale sign here, a little cottage that has a flat roof.
지금 배터리가 다 나가는데 이게 배터리가 다 나갔어. 그러니까 이제 배터리가 다 나갔어 이제. 우리 복싱 사진을 찍고 있는데 배터리가 다 나갔다고요. 동영상 배터리가 거의 다 나갔어 이제.
네?
배터리가 거의 다 나갔다고.
Now the next island we're going to pass up ahead on the left is called Kindersley Island. It used to belong to one of my dad's friends a long time ago, but after he had passed away, the island was sold to a fellow from Hamilton in the early 70s. He's retired now, so he's up here all the time. His cottage is on the other side of the island up ahead. But like many family-owned islands, there's more than one cottage. Well, the kids have grown up. The next generation